the silent depths of a forgotten lake, two lovers are bound together for eternity. They chose the cold embrace of the water over the cruelty of a world that tried to tear them apart. Now, this isn't a history lesson. You won't find their names or dates confirmed by any scholar. This is a legend. It's a story whispered on the wind in the Austrian Alps, a tale that has soaked into the very landscape. This is the tragic story of a baron's daughter who defied her powerful father for her one true love, a poor forester from the woods. Our story takes us to the heart of Tyrol, a region in Austria defined by staggering peaks and emerald valleys. Here, surrounded by all that breathtaking beauty, sits a small, pristine lake, the Berglsteinersee. It's a place of deep tranquility, with dense forests climbing the slopes of the mountains all around it. But the most beautiful places often hide the darkest stories, and the legend of this lake is born from pride, cruelty, and a love that dared to defy them both. According to local folklore, high on a ridge overlooking the lake, there once stood the grim fortress of Guggenbühl. Only ruins are left today, but back then it was the home of a powerful and notoriously proud baron. The stories don't give him a name. He's known only by his title and his tough character. He was a man as hard and unyielding as the stone of his castle, and he had a singular treasure he valued above all else: his daughter. The legend calls her Elara. And while you won't find any historical record of a noblewoman by that name here, in this story, she's the heart of the castle, a bit of warmth in its cold stone halls. But she was a treasure to be guarded, not a daughter to be loved. Her father saw her as a key to unlocking more power, her hand in marriage just a token to be traded for land or influence. It never even crossed his mind that her heart might have a will of its own. And then there was the forester. The tale names him Loric. Just like Elara, his name belongs to folklore, not to history books. He was a man of the woods, as poor in coin as the baron was rich, but he had a different kind of wealth. He knew the secrets of the forest, the language of the birds, and the paths of the stars. He was everything the baron wasn't: gentle, free, and connected to the world around him. He represented a life of freedom that Elara, trapped in her gilded cage, could only dream of. Their worlds were separated by an impassable social chasm, a divide as wide and deep as the Tyrolean valleys. A love between them wasn't just forbidden, it was unthinkable. And as it so often goes, the unthinkable is precisely what happened. Their love story didn't start with some grand announcement. It began with stolen glances. Maybe she saw him from her window, a lone figure moving through the trees with a confidence she'd never seen inside the castle walls. Or perhaps they first spoke when her riding party ventured into the forest and he returned a lost glove or gave her a drink from a hidden spring. The legend doesn't give us the details, leaving us to imagine the quiet, tentative start to their love. The forest became their church. The shores of the Berglsteinersee became their sanctuary. Away from the watchful eyes of Guggenbühl Castle, they could just be themselves. To Loric, Elara wasn't a baron's daughter. She was a woman with a quick wit who longed for a world beyond her father's control. To Elara, Loric wasn't just a poor forester. He was the keeper of a wild, beautiful kingdom, a man whose spirit was as untamed as the mountains. In his world, she learned the names of wildflowers and the calls of the deer. She felt the damp earth under her fingers and the cool lake water on her skin. It was a total awakening, so different from the sterile, suffocating formality of her life. With him, she wasn't an asset to be traded. She was simply loved. They would talk about a future they both knew was a fantasy. A small cottage, a simple life, governed only by the seasons and their love for each other. It was a beautiful, impossible dream. Every shared whisper, every secret touch was an act of rebellion. They were building a world just for the two of them, right under the nose of a man who would tear it all down without a second thought. They were happy. Yes, but their happiness was fragile, like a spider's web spun in the shadow of the gallows. and they both knew, with a creeping sense of dread, that it couldn't last. How long could a secret like that stay hidden? The end of their perfect world came as these things often do, suddenly and brutally. The old stories vary on how it happened. Some say a gossiping servant trying to get on the Baron's good side revealed the secret. Others, more dramatically, suggest the Baron himself grew suspicious of his daughter's long and frequent rides and followed her one afternoon. Let's imagine that version. Picture the Baron, cloaked and on foot, moving through his own lands like a spy. He follows the path down to the lake, and his suspicion twists into a cold knot in his stomach. And there, on the shore, he sees them. He sees his daughter, the key to his ambition and pride, resting her head on the shoulder of a common forester. He sees her smile, a real, unguarded smile he realizes he's rarely seen. He sees the forester touch her hair with a tenderness that, to the Baron, was the ultimate crime. It wasn't just the defiance that enraged him. It was the intimacy. It was seeing his daughter choose a world of dirt and trees over one of stone and power. For him, it was the ultimate betrayal. Her love for this man was a direct insult to his authority, his legacy, and his very identity. But the Baron didn't storm out and confront them. No, the legend paints him as a man of cold, calculated cruelty. He slipped back into the shadows, his mind already racing with a venomous plan. This wouldn't end with a simple order or a locked door. This insult required a more permanent and more painful solution. That evening, everything changed. Elara was summoned to her father's chambers. The silence was terrifying. He didn't shout. He spoke in a low, chilling voice, telling her that her little trips were over. She was now a prisoner in her own home, guarded day and night, until he could arrange a marriage to a nobleman from a distant land. When she begged and cried, he was like stone. Her love, he told her, was a sickness, and he was the cure. As for Loric, the Baron's revenge was far more direct. He wasn't going to be warned or banished. He was going to be erased. The Baron gathered his most loyal men and his most vicious hounds. The forester, he declared, was a poacher who had stolen his most prized possession. The order was simple. Hunt him down. The night was moonless, a blanket of pure black thrown over the forest. The only sounds were rustling leaves and the distant cry of an owl. Suddenly that peace was shattered. The baying of hounds echoed through the valley, a savage, terrifying sound that didn't signal a hunt for an animal, but for a man. Loric heard it. Maybe a sympathetic stable hand had warned him, or maybe he sensed the change in the air. He knew that sound was for him. He ran. He fled into the wilderness that was once his sanctuary, but was now a deadly maze. He knew these woods better than any of the Baron's men, but they had numbers, torches, and bloodthirsty dogs on their side. Back in the castle, Elara heard that same horrific sound. She knew with sickening certainty what it meant. Her father wasn't just separating them. He was going to kill Loric. In that moment, any fear she had for her father was burned away by a desperate, ferocious love. She had to warn him. She had to get to him. And this is where, as so often happens in folk tales, a small act of kindness changes everything. The legend says a young maid, Elara's longtime confidant, took a terrible risk. While the guards were distracted by the hunt, she unlocked the door to Elara's room. Elara didn't hesitate. She swapped her fine clothes for a simple dark dress and slipped out of the castle like a ghost. She ran toward the sound of the hounds, her heart pounding. She followed the flickering lights of the torches, praying she would find Loric before they did. The forest floor, which she had learned to navigate with him in the daylight, was now a trap of grasping roots and thorns that tore at her clothes and skin. The chase was a blur of terror. The shouts of the men grew closer, the barking more frantic. Loric was fast and clever, doubling back on his tracks and using his knowledge of the land, but he was getting tired, and they were relentless. Finally, Through the chaos, Elara found him. They met in a small clearing, in a frantic, breathless embrace. But there was no time for relief. The circle of light and noise was closing in. There was only one direction left to run. Down, toward the dark, still waters of the Berglsteinersee. They burst through the last line of trees and found themselves on the rocky shore of the lake. Behind them, the forest was alive with their pursuers. The baying of the hounds was deafening, the shouts of men echoing their names. In front of them, the lake was a vast expanse of black, silent water. There was no boat. There was no escape. The torches of the Baron's men appeared through the trees, pinning them in a harsh, flickering light. At the front of the group was the Baron himself, his face a mask of triumph and fury. He had them. His daughter would be dragged back to her cage, and the forester would die right here on the shore. He called out her name. It was a command, not a plea. "Come back, daughter. It is over." Loric stood in front of her, shielding her with his body, his eyes darting around for any chance of escape. But there was nothing. They were trapped between the Baron's hatred and the deep, cold water. In that moment, looking at the man she loved, who was about to die for her, and then at her father, whose pride would see them both broken, Elara made a choice. The legend says she turned to Loric, her eyes clear and determined. She would not go back to the castle. She would not live a life without him. And she would not stand by and watch him be torn apart by her father's dogs. She took his hand. He looked at her, and in his eyes she didn't see fear. She saw understanding. He saw the same truth she did. A life apart wasn't a life at all. Getting caught meant a brutal death for him and a living death for her. But here, at the edge of the water, they had one final desperate move they could make. Together. It was a choice born not of despair, but of ultimate defiance. If the world wouldn't let them live together, they would not let it force them to die apart. Their decision was made in a silent glance. A vow. Without another word, they turned their backs on the Baron and his mob. Hand in hand, they took a step forward, off the rocky ledge, and into the icy embrace of the Berglsteinersee. The black water swallowed them whole. And then there was only silence. The surface of the lake settled into a placid, dark mirror, reflecting the sputtering torches of the stunned men on the shore. The Baron stood frozen at the water's edge, his victory turned to ash in his mouth. He screamed for his men to search, to dive in, to find his daughter. They searched all night, their torches cutting feeble paths through the darkness. They searched the next day and the day after. But the bodies of the Baron's daughter and her forester lover were never found. It was as if the lake itself had claimed them, hiding them away in its silent, secret depths. But the story doesn't end there. As the sun rose on the third day, the search party, gathered wearily by the shore, noticed something impossible. Where there had been only open water the day before, two large rocks now pierced the surface of the lake. This is the heart of the legend, where tragedy turns into myth. Folklore claims these rocks had not been there before. They emerged from the depths, a permanent marker of that night. One rock was rugged and overgrown with dark green ferns, like the untamed forest Loric called home. The other was smoother, its surface pale and polished like fine stone, a reflection of Elara's gentle nobility. The Baron, broken by his hollow victory, eventually faded into obscurity. His family line died out, and Guckenbühl Castle fell into ruin, a crumbling monument to a father's destructive pride. But the rocks remained. The Petrified Lovers, as they came to be known, stood together in the middle of the lake, forever united. They had made their choice, and the lake, the very landscape of their love story, had seemingly honored it, transforming them into an eternal testament to their bond. So what are we to make of this story? It's important to remember, this isn't a documented historical event. The names Elara and Loric belong to folklore. And geologically speaking, of course, the rocks in the Berglsteinersee are natural formations that have been there for millennia. They didn't magically appear. But to dismiss the story because it's not literally true is to miss its deeper meaning. This is a classic origin myth, a story created to explain a feature of the natural world and to give it a human heart. The tale of the Petrified Lovers is part of a global tradition. The theme of people turning to stone is found in cultures all over the world, sometimes as a punishment, but in cases like this, as a symbol of eternal, unbreakable love. By tying the story of Elara and Loric to these two specific rocks, the people of the region transformed a simple lake into a memorial. The landscape itself became the storyteller. The rocks are no longer just rocks. They're a monument to defiance. The story is a powerful commentary on the rigid social classes of the past, a warning against destructive pride, and a romantic tribute to a love so strong it overcomes even death. It frames the lovers' final act not as a surrender, but as a victory. They chose their own ending, and in doing so, found a way to be together forever. Today, the legend is a cherished piece of Tyrolean culture. The Berglsteinersee is a popular spot for hikers, and the tale of the two lovers is often told to visitors. It adds a layer of romance and mystery to the stunning natural beauty, ensuring that Elara and Loric, whether they truly lived or not, will never be forgotten. The story of the Baron's daughter and her forester lover leaves us with a powerful question about their final, desperate choice. Was it an act of ultimate strength, a refusal to be broken by a cruel world? Or was it an act of desperation, a tragic end for a love that had no other way out? What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this story as hauntingly beautiful as we do, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more tales of folklore, love, and legend from around the world. Thank you for watching. Because in the heart of the Austrian Alps, two stones stand as a testament not to a tragic end, but to a love that refused to be separated.